On the evening of May 1st, 1960, the sky over Sverdlovsk became the stage for an incredible secret. In the darkness of high-altitude reconnaissance, a flying ghost hovered, the U-2 plane, tasked only with gathering photographs and films. But what if I told you that on board, there were not just images, but live traitors of the Kremlin? Could this silent interceptor not only capture the enemy's strategies, but also transport the most valuable cargo of the 20th century? Human lives? CIA telegram number X853 contains only a few lines, but they make you think extraordinary cargo, and mention of CL7, classified as sentient. This marking was used to signify something with a soul, something that feels fear and hope. That night, the ghost embarked with a consciousness backed by a secret capable of altering perceptions of how far the two superpowers were willing to sacrifice people for their own interests. Today, we will unveil one of the most mysterious operations of the Cold War, a story that still doesn't appear in any textbook. You will hear about flights on the edge of space, about codes that echoed through the U-2 cockpit, about agent codes whose names were erased from any records, and even a sudden SOS signal that almost sounded a minute before the catastrophe. Welcome to a world where truth is harder to find than a pilot among the wreckage. In the heart of Reagan's America, when only the first fragile attempts at aerial reconnaissance hovered over the Soviet Union, the ambitious U-2 program was born. In the NARA, National Archives and Records Administration, labs, reports with neat lines of numbers and codes hide human courage and fear. Lockheed engineers worked day and night testing composite materials and new engines to fly higher than any Soviet radar. And while everything on paper looked flawless, another set of statistics followed them: the name of every pilot who gave their life for high-altitude reconnaissance. In the Pentagon report, only dry numbers, but behind them were the fates of the pilots, reads one cautious analyst's comment. The spring of 1960 opened the doors to serious negotiations. The Paris summit of heads of state was preparing. Under the sunlight, French tables filled with glasses of champagne, sparkling in crystal, while thousands of kilometers away, in the silence of Siberian steppes, radar signals appeared about a foreign object at an altitude of over 20,000 meters. The first U-2s had already been tested over Cuba in 1957. At that time, one plane didn't return, and behind the calm official reports on both sides of the Atlantic, the trail of black body bags with the pilot's remains was hidden. After the 1957 ghost flight over Cuba, the CIA bought thousands of black bags, recalls a former Marine who later became a Pentagon consultant. But these losses didn't slow the program's stellar path. Each flight became a demonstration of the U.S. technological government, and each pilot, a silent hero, risking everything for a few pictures of Soviet nuclear complexes. In February 1960, U-2 pilots were already gathering evidence of missile battery deployments near Smolensk, and in March, they were monitoring caravan movements in Kazakhstan. During the flight preparations, NARA archives were used. The atmospheric data sheets still stand covered in dust, but only a few dared to look at who exactly stood at the control levers. During these months, espionage networks were transmitting to Washington lists of special agents whose lives were at risk. Declassified KGB transcripts recorded that particularly important subjects numbered only 14, and after the plane's fall, 5 went missing. Who were they? A cipher engineer or perhaps a former high-ranking officer who defected across the ocean? Their codes sounded like a random set of symbols, but behind each of them lay a story of fear and hope for freedom. Political currents swirled in the air like electromagnetic pulses that interrupted the silence. The U.S. sought to prove its readiness for open conflict, while the Kremlin considered every symmetric response to a provocation as a reason for war. Hope was placed in the balance of fear. And so, high stakes were made for every U-2 flight. Engineers transmitted not only technical instructions to pilots, but also personal notes. 21,036 meters, the boundary where even radio falls silent, and each word in these notes sounded like a melody of dying freedom. Thus, the myth of the ghost plane was born, capable of penetrating behind enemy lines without any warning. But even the best technological know-how couldn't erase earthly gravity and human errors. The selection of pilots took place under the harshest conditions: psychological tests, orientation in the tiny space of a narrow cockpit, extreme training in water and cold. And although NARA documents were numbered and systematized, behind each number were the cries of those who saw the world only from the window high in the sky. Trembling hands, shaking no less than the heart. As the preparation for the crystal flight over Sverdlovsk took place, with pilots gathering to discuss the route and refuel, no one suspected that this mission would surpass all previous ones in terms of secrecy. The first wave of flights, which started from Pakistan and made stops in Western Europe, was merely reconnaissance before the real test of fate, when not a camera, but human lives hung by a thread between sky and earth. The U-2 aircraft, departing from the Mirjan Air Base in Pakistan on the night of May 1-2, 1960, carried not just ballast. For the first time in the program's history, it was transporting secret human assets to the edge of human understanding. Before the flight, the mechanics made the final decision: to top up the jet fuel JP-7 to the maximum, and only then ascend to an altitude of over 21,000 meters. The route passed through the mountain passes of Iran, then Turkey and the Balkans, before the brilliant trail would appear on Ukrainian radars, signaling the approach of this phantom bird. On board was the pilot with the call sign Falcon, an experienced veteran of hundreds of high-altitude flights, but even his hands on the control wheel trembled from the cold touch of the steering. The pressure in the cabin was maintained artificially. Under the compressive forces, even the tiniest crack in the hermetic shell could prove fatal. 21,336 meters, the boundary where even radio falls silent. These numbers were etched into the memory of all who participated in the project. At this height, helium ballast balloons burst in an instant, and a living being could lose consciousness before even a single radio signal could reach them. The first phase of the flight went without incident. Falcon ascended over the Hindu Kush, looking back at the dying lights of the farms, sending a positive report to headquarters. Then came Iran, the transition over towering peaks, where turbulence awakened terrifying memories even in those who had survived bombings during World War II. After crossing the Syrian border, the U-2 descended to 8,000 meters for refueling in a secret hangar near the city of Homs, where mechanics spent an hour filling the tanks and carefully checking the cabin's airtightness. The combined traffic light of flight control in northern Turkey indicated that the third phase was beginning, bypassing Soviet air defense through the Black Sea coast of Bulgaria and Romania. The radar stations on the ground only recorded brief flashes, and the aircraft vanished from their sight, ascending beyond the maximum radar sensitivity. At that moment, Crystal was already flying over the Western Carpathians, and in the U-2's cockpit, there were only the ringing heartbeats of those sitting in the special compartment behind the pilot. This compartment was equipped as strictly as a research laboratory. The thermostat maintained a temperature of +5 degrees C, and the aftertaste of pressurized oxygen was like a taste of darkness. When it passed over Hungary, all life sensors on board went silent. Information was transmitted only in code, so that the KGB wouldn't even imagine who they might shoot down. Among the agents, the special cargo was known by the call sign CL7, but each of them had their own code: 927B, 58K, 12MB. Each symbol saved a life, but also could become a death sentence. And next to Falcon, on the narrow seat, lay a single note: in case of failure, execute null heartbeat protocol, a phrase torn from the CRIS-12 document, with the cipher Golden Bird, meaning one thing. Even if the life signal disappeared, no one would find evidence on the ground. Approaching Sverdlovsk, the U-2 reached its final altitude and silently dove over the endless taiga expanse. But just a few kilometers from the target, when all thoughts were focused on reconnaissance object photography, the official KGB radio transmission came through. Live, cargo, confirmed. Altitude 21,000 meters. The KGB operator, standing by the screen for retransmission, later recalled, "I heard only a broken breath and a short 'ready.'" This sound was like a final sigh, the last hint that behind the reconnaissance cameras were not just images of prisoners, but flesh and blood people. A few minutes into the flight over Sverdlovsk, the engine's roar muffled under the radar frequencies of the air defense, and the communication was lost. Thus ended the second phase of the Crystal mission, a mission that could have become a turning point in the information and shadow wars. And even if the vast amounts of data failed to provide evidence of transporting live agents, everyone involved in the operation knew on that U-2 that evening flew not just a machine, but a ruthless idea that would shape history. In the darkness of the cold cockpit, there sat codes, and behind them, people. Agent 927B, known in CIA circles as the artificial intelligence of decryptions, was the creator of the legendary cipher Kaleidoscope. According to official documents, he suffered from a mild alcohol allergy, a small detail that in no way affected his skill in cracking Soviet codes, but provided excellent amusement for his guards during night shifts. Alongside him was Agent 58K, known for her ability to slip through any barrier, like a ghost. Both were listed in the KGB's secret roster as Kremlin traitors, whose lifestyle called into question their loyalty to the Soviet system. According to these documents, their evacuation did not foresee a return. The risk was too high, the stakes too great. In the protocols of case number KG-0457, the name of Colonel Lazarev appears, who allegedly accompanied the codebreaker passengers until the moment of ejection. His testimony is recorded in the form of transcripts, where he claims that the parachutes for 927B and 58K never opened because the object was meant to remain without a trace. Their evacuation had to be so clean that the Kremlin would not receive any hint of the loss of valuable personnel, is recorded in the protocol lines. And although these words sound harsh, they reflect the cold logic of the intelligence services. In the field of espionage, sometimes the principle of exhuming shadows applies, when the very fact of disappearance becomes the safest cover. Later, CIA archives revealed notes by Anna Rose, dated May 2, 1960, marked in red, "No ballistic." She emphasized this 3 times, placing a heavy period after the last underline. Anna was one of the few who saw photographs of the cockpit after the crash. No damage, no signs of bullet trajectory or missile fragments. This raised suspicion because the standard protocol for destroying a U-2 called for the detection of ballistic traces. Her notes became a beacon for those seeking the truth. Silence about ballistics supported the version of transporting a live passenger, not ordinary materials. While officials exchanged figures in press talks and Pentagon briefings among analysts, a theory spread that on board the U-2 that evening was not just a ciphered object, but a real avalanche of witnesses, people capable of revealing the secrets of the Kremlin. They were called living wine, a pun on sentient wine, because every drop of information they carried was as valuable as the warmth of a human touch. Others, more cynical, joked, "What's easier? Hide the truth or hide the body?" And this dilemma became the heart of speculations. If the ejection was impossible, if the parachutes didn't open, then who was lying under the wreckage in the Siberian forests? A nameless corpse or 2 conscious agents, whose minds were still fighting for freedom. In conspiracy circles, another rumor emerged. Supposedly, some cockpit footage was successfully retrieved by the KGB before the pilot fell. The operator at the Sverdlovsk station allegedly heard only a broken breath and a short "ready," followed by an ominous silence. This sound became a marker in the special fund as a sign of terrifying uncertainty. It was unclear whether the victims were alive or if the bodies ever made it to the ground. Secret programs, such as CRIS-12, were encrypted with the phrase "null heartbeat," a direct order to erase any evidence of the passenger's life without a trace. And just as speculations reached their peak, another version appeared: the possibility of disguising as corpses. Many speculated that the agents were placed into deep comas or given special drugs so that their vital functions were almost indistinguishable from clinical death. If anyone inspected the cabin from the outside, they would see only silent bodies, no signs of movement, no characteristic life signals. After the crash, these dead would simply be removed from the investigation trail and later evacuated through other channels. This theory explained the silence of official CIA representatives and the absence of ballistic traces. Since no shots were fired, there were no bullets. As a result, the living shadow passenger section became the hub of the most secretive speculations. From the cipher developer with an alcohol allergy to the harsh null heartbeat protocol, from Lazarev's suffering to Anna Rose's emphasized phrase, "no ballistic." Each detail added layers of reality, a reality where the boundaries between life and death, truth and fiction, blurred against the cold Siberian sky. And the most important thing, this story remains open, like that very shadow passenger whose voice echoes among the wreckage of a giant secret. In the cozy half-darkness of the CIA vaults lies a file marked 1960 U-2 902R. Every line on the yellow paper seems sewn onto steel. The numbers echo in the silence. Coordinates, speed, altitude, camera codes. And only in the margins does a note appear. No signs of live evacuation. The digital file tag, CIA 1960 U-2 902R. Like a verdict, prompting doubt about any official version. Why is there no mention of passengers in the report about the flight over Sverdlovsk? Did someone really dare to hide the most precious? Compare this with Dr. Igor Savchenko's assessment, who in his lectures leaves no doubt. There is no witness of a live evacuation. In his opinion, if there were people aboard the U-2, someone from the technical staff or observers would have left at least one mention: a report, a note in the journal, or a verbal testimony. On the other hand, Professor Lena Morozova sees the problem deeper. There are indirect indications: radio intercepts that recorded broken breathing in the headphones, unknown annotations by Anna Rose in documents from May 2nd, and the codes in case KGB 0457 hint that between the lines, secrets are still hidden. The official version speaks of scientific missions and photographs captured by the high-precision U-2 cameras. But when we delve into the atmospheric data and blueprints transmitted from Nara warehouses, we understand. Through the dry numbers, another plot emerges. We know for sure that the cabin was not designed for people, but this very question opens the door to an alternative. Who said the standard rules couldn't be bypassed? If there was a chance to deceive the system, they were waiting for it in such conditions. The imagination is challenged by the borrowed medical notes from the secret fund R. Experimental life support methods, not publicly available, instructions for oxygenating the blood in rarefied air, and special cocktails to maintain consciousness. These protocols are classified as top secret. Just imagine what details are hidden there. Maybe it is there that the answers lie, to whether the CIA engineers really learned to turn the cockpit of a bomber into a rescue capsule. Our story wouldn't be complete without comparing facts with legends. On one side, official documents based on data from engineers and journalists at the Washington Post. On the other, the memories of those who worked on the U-2 program, and those among them who pored over the same sheets where classified secrets were left. In this game against themselves, reality becomes a canvas for the political prisoners of the past and the legend, the final argument. So, what lies behind the black marker in these lines? Why, even after the declassification of some archives, do only silhouettes of documents remain in the safes? And most importantly, are we ready to accept the uncomfortable truth if it brings to light what we have always believed to be an innocent reconnaissance flight? Only the answers to these questions will give us the real key to the mystery. When the screen fades, and only the echo of the R code and the cold whisper of endless secrets remain. The cockpit is in tense anticipation. On the Soviet Air Defense Control Station, Khrushchev, in a quick phone call, gives a direct order. Go on, do not allow the disclosure of the live cargo. Up. In the leak of conversations between the head of the USSR Council of Ministers and the Chief of Staff of the French aircraft manufacturer Mile, only fragments are heard, like a silent whisper in the wind. We need silence and oblivion, not heroes. This phrase sounds like a sentence. It doesn't matter what is flying in the space between the stars and the Earth. What matters is that no one should raise a toast to those who dared to challenge the system. At the CIA, far across the ocean, analysts suddenly notice an illogicality in the satellite and radar data. The long-range communication device wavered on the call sign frequency, and for a moment, exactly 60 seconds before the Sverdlovsk missile systems were supposed to begin their destruction, the SOS signal was heard. On the 136 MHz frequency, between the walls of the lunar silence, a barely audible whisper was heard, System 404. Most operators dismissed it as technical noise, but experienced listeners immediately understood. This wasn't a failure. It was a life signal, loud in its minuteness. Details begin to surface from the archives. A radio recording made just before the strike demonstrates a clear tonal shift in frequency. This shift is a sign of the cabin switching from normal to emergency mode. A minute earlier, the pilot with the call sign Phoenix 6 left the final voice code. Remember those who are waiting. He didn't name names, but it spoke more than any numbers. This appeal sounded like an echo in an empty control room, as if someone had thrown a torch into the darkness and the flame hung in the air. In the official reports, the munitions are referred to as discrimination elements, radar returns, anomalies in the magnetic field. No mention that there might have been more than just equipment in the cockpit. But now, in conversations between CIA analysts and reserve pilots, the instruction is mentioned. If you lose contact, use the 404 code as a protest against silence. No one knows who this code was intended for, whether it was the Phoenix 6 cry just before the disaster or a ghost echoing through the radar operators' clocks over the air defense system. At the center of focus for all intelligence operations is the voice of Phoenix 6. This recording is processed through noise cancellation filters, and the last phrase is heard, "Remember those who have already been erased from the maps." These words become the emotional chord, the blow to the heart of Operation Crystal. There are no technical details here, no mention of pressure or temperature, just a human tragedy reduced to a concise call. In the archive analysis room, silence falls. Everyone realizes this call is not for oneself. It is an address to all whose names have been erased from history. It reminds us that somewhere between the clouds and the earth was not just a machine, but a human fate. And although official files are stuffed with numbers, graphs, and codes, it is the voice of Phoenix 6 that becomes the most significant proof. That same living pang that even the harshest secrecy regimes cannot erase. The climax ends in silence, but this silence weighs tons. The echo of Khrushchev's negotiations is interrupted by the visualization of the black top-secret stamp on the glassed-in archive sheet. The 404 radio signal disappears as quickly as it appeared, and the last reminder of the Crystal flight remains the recording. Remember those who have already been erased from the maps. And even if technical breakdowns, engineering data, and soulless reports will dominate later, this cry of the soul, this last whisper, will fly through history, reminding us that the most powerful secrets are stored not in numbers, but in voices that cannot be forgotten. By 2025, only 8% of the materials had been declassified, and even this tiny fragment of information leaves more questions than answers. Who were they? Did their lives truly become more valuable than any weapon of that time? And at what point does the idea of protecting state secrets transform into silencing human fate? Is the peace of the state worth the silence of the witnesses? For every top-secret stamp hides not just words on paper, but the lives of people who risked everything for freedom or personal beliefs. How ready are we to accept that behind the idea of national security, there might not only be control over information, but also control over the right to life and memory? Think about those moments when the smoke over Sverdlovsk was settling, and how the world looked at the meteorological radar network, unaware of the real content of the operation. Think about the voice of Phoenix 6 warning about the fates of those already erased from the maps. His words remain with us today, as a call not to forget those who couldn't tell their story. Write in the comments if you have investigated similar Cold War secrets, which facts shocked you the most, and which questions remain unanswered. Tell us why it's important for you to remember the people whose names are still hidden under the top-secret stamp, and how this affects our understanding of history. Next time, we will uncover the true winter cherry, the tape that even Langley feared to play. It contains the voices of witnesses from NKVD operations, footage of interrogations, and orders that changed the fates of dozens of people. We'll dive into a world where sound became the most powerful evidence, and the slightest rustle could lead to the most tragic consequences. Get ready for an episode that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the KGB and the methods they worked with behind the scenes. And remember, the darkest secrets are not always hidden in archives. They may lie in our own memories.